Joan was asking, can you please talk a bit more about how to work ocean concepts with dogs who disconnect in highly arousing situations like breaking start lines, pulling to get into the ring, etc.? Yeah, so this is a common issue, right? And I actually, in my bonus videos, I've got some Band-Aids in terms of like how to use a slip light lead in a way that's going to help you get in the ring if you don't have this massive problem, but you don't want your dog pulling on her neck or his neck so much. I think if you can view the agility experience from your dog's perspective, when does the run really start? Actually, from your own perspective too. Does the run start when you lead out? Did the run start when you enter the ring? When you release your dog? Does the run start when you leave your car? If your dog's crated in the car? Or at what point do you think the run starts? And my perspective is the run starts right now. Everything between now and the infinite future is where the run exists. It's in a continuum of time. So this idea that we build up like to this big crescendo, which is maybe the release, and to us, so the run starts at the release and it ends when the dog takes the last obstacle or when we leash up the dog or whatever. But I see it as just part of a continuum of relationship. And by viewing it that way, I'm going to notice how my dog gets out of the car or out of the crate. I'm going to notice, how we are interacting and relating when I'm pottying my dog. I'm going to notice, and I'm not saying I'm going to be controlling and the dog has to focus on me and it's all about us and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to be observing everything about my dog like I would be in an ocean training session. It's not really a training session, but an ocean session as we move towards the ring. I'm going to be observing my dog to see how my dog is taking in the environment. I'm going to be moving my dog around. I'm going to probably keep my dog moving a little bit unless my dog is completely relaxed, smiling. Same dog I have at home in my yard, relaxing, that kind of dog. Yeah, I'm going to let my dog choose to lie down in the shade. If that's the dog I have at home, that's cool. And Dakota has transformed into that kind of dog at some sites where there is big grassy areas and stuff. But if my dog is starting to look in any way not typical for my dog, I'm going to be responding with compassion. I'm going to be helping my dog stay in a good, positive mental state. And that doesn't start at any point other than this moment right now. So I would say the dog that gets over-aroused and can't stay at the start line, that's not an issue. That's not a start line issue. And I think anybody who's tried to fix a start line issue by changing a position and all that, you might get a couple of runs out of that, or you might get a couple of trials, but you'll realize it's become the big game of whack the mole. It keeps popping up in different ways. And actually, let's go beyond start line. Let's say before you had a start line problem, you had a contact problem. Your dog was self-releasing on the contacts. And so you do training, more training, and the contacts. Now finally you've got, contacts that are really good because you were really firm that if your dog blew a contact, you always left. And it was really easy to leave because you already were disqualified. So it's easy to be strong and consistent because there's no cue. But let's say now the mole has popped his head up at your start line. And let's say you really do need this cue, like you're closing in on a big championship title. And I am not above all this. I'm speaking of us as in all of us, not you as not including me. So the reason I hate to be close to getting a championship title is because it's really, really hard to not get sucked into this whole thing that I'm describing. So, okay, so now you've got a dog that is now doing the contacts, and now the whack-a-mole's popped its head up, and now it's at the start line. And you're like, damn, I really want this run. This is our kind of course. And you just let it go. So, and it's the wrong thing to do. And let's say your dog knocks a bar, and so you still need that one cue. So the next run, your dog again, breaks the start line. Now you start getting pissed off, right? Because it's like, you still want to go for it. So before you know it, you have like completely lost sight of your consistency and your communication to your dog about what we're doing together. And now you think, you really need to fix the start line issue because that's what's in your way of getting your championship title. So now you start working on start lines. And you might squeak out a cue, but more likely you will start creating conflict in your relationship with your dog because you have this inner conflict of you want the championship title and your dog is not giving you what you need to get it. So I would say that start line issues, they're just an example of a whack the mole, and that a lot of start line issues are because it hasn't screwed up your cue. You aren't consistent like you would be with other stuff. So that's, I think, why it manifests at the start line, along with treating the beginning of the run at some point like it is, entering the ring or whatever you're thinking of the beginning of the run as, that you're not paying attention to what's leading up to that point. And there were lots of opportunities for you to help your dog be in a better mental state. So I'm going to use like one example of, Dakota. When I moved here 3 years ago, there were a handful of really loud, monotonous, like metronome barking dogs. And the last trial I went to, some of those same dogs were not so barky. So that was really, really surprising and wonderful. But Dakota, I'd never seen Dakota act that way at a trial. And he was a young dog then, he was like 2.5. And he was nervous and anxious. And he expressed it through running, with, too fast, and his adrenaline was running, so he wasn't in touch with his appendages, and it was unsafe, and it was just, it was not my dog. And so throughout that trial, I just tried different things and worked him outside and tried to do things that we do at home that, and I tried a bunch of things, but what worked then at that first trial was playing like I throw this holy roller in his mouth and tug, throw it in his mouth and tug. And I think the reason that worked is it was an energy match for him. He was feeling high arousal anxious, and so this gave him something to do about that. And so I did that. And I also made sure I came into the arena at the very last minute. I tried to move myself in the run order away from the barking dogs. And incidentally, this was, within 6 months of him being attacked unprovoked by a German Shepherd that broke through a barrier in the back of a truck, and the dog was barking its head off in a similar tone that these dogs were barking. So it's not happy barking, it's more like rah, 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 this intense barking. So I also gave him the benefit of the doubt that his anxiety about that was perhaps based on a somewhat recent incident, although I don't know for sure. So everything that happened in that run that was performance related had nothing to do with performance. And had I kept trialing him there, I think without a break, he would have developed some performance problems. And had I not seen the performance problems as being related to a mental emotional state, I would have spent all this time training a better performance out of him. And the reason this kind of works is part of that, the dog's mental state can evolve over time through these sheer repetitions. And so you can, as a side thing, you can get the benefits without really focusing on that. But when you switch it around and focus purely on mental and emotional, the other stuff transforms as the side benefit, and it transforms quicker. Because if you have a performance issue, if you have a performance issue, or if it's a mental emotional issue, focusing on the main thing is going to resolve it. If you focus on the other thing, it might eventually get better, but it's not going to, boom, laser get better. So these dogs that have high arousal, like I'm going to take Rowan, because I know Rowan, Joan's older lab, that he's like a high drive dog, and it's not a negative. He is just, some dogs, I've seen some labs just like him. that they are just big and bold, and that's the way they do life. So I wouldn't be, and I had a terrier, my first terrier, big and bold. That's the way he did life. And these dogs, they're as unique as we are. Just like certain things set us off, like some people have some anxiety about flying and driving or whatever that is. That is part of your personal makeup. So our dogs have these same things. So for me, with what worked with Jake, and I think what the same type of thing works with dogs like Jake, which is like Rowan, is that you're really embracing the dog you have, and you're working with it, and you're molding versus trying to suppress. Because when you suppress, you're creating this conflict, and that kind of bumps your relationship against each other. And it's like, if you've ever been in a relationship with somebody who, wants you to be different than you are, the conflict that is created, and then how you can't even act naturally because you don't know how else to act. And the same, like, think about dogs. If you think about when we're saying, I don't like you to be the way you are, I want you to be less high drive, I want you to be calm, I want you to be like that dog or that dog. Well, now you've completely taken away what is natural expression in your dog, and your dog is going to be confused and not know what to do, just like a human being would. So in Ocean, we start with these simple actions with low arousal, and engagement with joy starts building it up. Attitude before anything builds it up more. And Never Stop Learning is this evolution of taking these principles of observe, connect, engage, all of this stuff into higher levels of arousal so that we human beings have an opportunity to learn how to observe your dog and connect with compassion and engagement with joy with our dogs as they become higher and higher in arousal level, and whatever things they do start showing up. So I hope that makes sense. And a lot of this is going to be happening naturally as we progress through these modules. So I'm talking about it now, but you'll actually be experiencing with your dogs in an environment that is conducive to learning. So for you and your dog. And Joan and Pixie, who's the dog in this in Ocean, and another dog I know, she's in my physical class at Marin Humane, that Pixie she exudes joy, happiness. She is smiling, her eyes are sparkling, and she just, she'd be the kind of person who'd be like saying, oh, and then we went to the mall, and then, oh, did I tell you that before we went to the mall, we went to this? And so she's a little bit like so excited, she wants to share everything. And Joan had a great insight about her that, that when she came to class, she was saying, Pixie's issues are, she gets distracted by birds, and she is a bird dog, she's a lab. And, she gets distracted by smells. And, yeah, that's what it appeared to be. But then Joan actually was able to see this exact same disconnecting behavior when they were doing a session of giving food on a mark bucket on her porch. So now Joan is able to work with the underlying mental and emotional, that kind of switch that Pixie naturally does. Instead of, it being on the agility field and thinking, oh, that's all about distraction, smell, blah, 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 which is the manifestation of the mental state. It is not the cause of the mental state. So that, is one of those huge ahas that even if you haven't had it for yourself, the recognition that these stories we tell ourselves about what our dog's issues are based on their external expressions of the issues, it's a story that it's all coming from within the dog. And that is what Ocean is designed to do, is to uncover that by getting things down to their most simple, basic elements and interacting and communicating with our dogs in an open and receptive way.